Greetings and salutations, friends and enemies. Perhaps It's You, an Unsolved Mysteries Rewatch podcast brought to you by Liz
and Samantha.
We're here today in the great state of Minnesota to solve some goddamn mysteries.
Why are we sending salutations to our enemies?
I just thought it'd be like a good
I do
opening.
like that. I like that intro. I kind of wonder why we haven't done that intro every time.
You know,
Greetings,
it's like
friends and enemies.
It's like a nice, non-gender specific, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies, gather around.
I support it. It's very on brand for us as well.
Hello, 5 listeners. Maybe it's like mostly friends and like 2 enemies that are hate listening.
Sure, we welcome them as well. It's still a download, whatever.
Yeah.
Just don't give us 1 star on iTunes.
No, not
Apple
allowed.
Podcasts.
We only accept 5-star reviews, so...
Listen away, I don't care.
How are you today, Samantha?
I'm great. How are you?
We were just watching videos of robots, as you do. Mm-hmm. I really want this robotic seal named Paro.
It's cute, unlike Sophia the robot, which maybe
terrifying.
You already have seen. I recently discovered that this robot is a thing. I guess you could call it or her. It's a robot, artificial intelligence. Go watch her interview on Jimmy Fallon. Yes, I just said that.
I'm trying to get Samantha to go to a conference where this is the keynote speaker.
Yeah, the reason
robot.
The reason I discovered this is because we were recently looking at an industry conference, and the keynote speaker is a robot. This robot, Sophia, who apparently has a credit card. What does a robot need a credit card for?
I don't know.
What are they buying?
Motherboards.
Replacement parts?
Other robots.
I'm sure. Maybe they're buying the seal robot as a pet.
Yeah.
Okay. It's an unusual...
Don't you think Samantha should go to this conference, everyone?
I don't know. I'm kind of worried that this robot... I mean, isn't that how, like, a science fiction movie starts? Where...
Yes.
Suddenly the doors lock from the outside and no one can get out of the, like, I don't know, the hall or wherever the speech is happening.
Who's seen the amazing movie Chopping Mall?
Chopping Mall?
Yes.
Is it as dumb as it sounds?
Oh, it's even worse. Chopping Mall is an 80s slasher movie where teens who were staying in the mall to have sex in the furniture store get hunted down by security robots because obviously the mall has put in robots that have lethal force.
Wow.
And then put the computer that controls the robots on the roof.
Okay.
As you do. And then that's struck by lightning. So then the robots are just want to kill.
Okay.
Kill those horny teenagers.
That's what they get for being horny.
I mean, it's such a good title.
Chopping Mall.
Yeah.
Solid title.
So that's what you could end up in.
Okay.
So I was recently in Las Vegas, and I can't wait till the end of the show. I'm going to give Samantha a present right now.
I'm excited. It's jingling. Okay, okay.
It's kind of related to the show, is why we're doing it.
Okay, there's a bag from Caesars.
So you may recall that there was an episode of Unsolved Mysteries where an old couple had a bell and a ghost kept ringing it. And so I found Samantha a sex bell.
This is a little yellow bell that says ring for sex.
As you do.
Yes. So my wedding gift, my bachelorette gift to Arden, friend of the pod Arden, who just got married, was a sex bell. For the same reason. I just think everyone needs one now.
I was so excited to find this that I actually was willing to go up to a cash register, put that on the counter, look someone in the eyes and be like, yes, this is what I want to purchase, a sex bell.
Liz also got me 2 Gordon Ramsay magnets.
I was so excited about it.
This is
oh
amazing.
My God. I spent so much of my trip just sending Samantha
every day
pics of photos of Gordon Ramsay because they're everywhere to promote his restaurants that are there. So I just like a constant bombardment of photos of Gordon Ramsay, and then
I feel like you can't throw a rock in Vegas without hitting a Gordon Ramsay billboard.
It's all the same photo, just over and over again, him staring at you. But Caesar's Palace has a Hell's Kitchen restaurant, and so their gift shop had like Gordon Ramsay merchandise, including these magnets with photos of him.
I don't quite understand what this one says. Is that MN from Minnesota?
No, I think he's saying well damn done, but his head is blocking most of damn.
Well damn done. Okay, I couldn't see that there was a D there.
Because he swears, you know?
Yeah, and to make it family friendly, the A is an @ sign. That's why I was confused.
It's so stupid.
I love these.
I was like, well, I'll get
Amazing.
2. You can have like one at home and one at work.
Oh yeah, that was my plan. Actually, I was just thinking that. I was like, which one do I take to work with me?
I didn't get Samantha a Hell's Kitchen chef coat because that was $80.
That seems overpriced.
Well,
but...
that's kind of the MO.
Amazing, thank you.
Enjoy your sex bell that I bought with real money.
I shall.
I was like in the store, like, man, look at this, and he's just like, oh my god, as I'm buying like fuzzy dice and other,
and a little bell that says "ring for sex."
Yes,
amazing.
Travis is not allowed to use it; only you.
Well, it's my sex bell, so obviously,
yeah. Okay, now we can talk about unsolved mysteries.
Do you have any show-related updates? I don't, actually.
I think some people told us some stuff about John Wilkes Booth, but I was like, that's John Wilkes Booth, who cares?
I did hear from Hazel the hedgehog
about
whether or not hedgehogs make noise. And it seems like the most noise they typically make is running on their wheels at night, which I think...
Does that count?
Well, I think Hazel is training for crop circle season.
Oh, good point.
Yeah.
Gotta work out those little legs.
So, you gotta train hard. It is strenuous activities. You got to be out there all night marching in a circle.
Well, I assume hedgehogs are nocturnal, so makes sense.
Right.
Makes sense.
Well, and also that's when you have to make the crop circle.
Exactly.
So it's all adding up. So thanks, Hazel, for that piece of information. That was my only update.
If you're in our Facebook group, you will see a photo of one of John Wilkes Booth's co-conspirators who, despite being garbage, trash human, was much more handsome than John Wilkes Booth.
Much more handsome.
So I'm not quite sure how he got known as the handsomest man in America, considering literally his friend right there was much more handsome than him. But, they were both trash garbage. But just in terms of maybe not having a mustache and also, I don't know, not having weird dead eyes like John Wilkes Booth seemed to have.
Yeah, the photograph of him, too, is very flattering. So...
I think that was the guy that ran out of the barn. I don't even remember because it's John Wilkes Booth.
I'm not sure. I barely paid attention to that mystery, so... But yeah, you should join our Facebook group. We have a lot of fun over there. I also posted photos of the ball sack tramp stamp.
Oh,
in our Facebook group. I thought long and hard about whether or not I wanted that on our Instagram account and then decided against it. So I posted it in our Facebook group, so you can go check that out if you're interested.
Watched a new clip of How Far Is Tattoo Far last night.
Man, I gotta keep up with that.
And it was a married couple with 4 children, and they both got each other terrible tattoos.
Oh my god.
Why?
I don't know why you would do that. I don't know why you would do that.
And now, okay, I'm gonna say what the dude says.
I need to hear it.
The dude now has I heart porn tattooed on his forearm.
On his forearm?
With the P and O in porn as boobs. And he's like, how am I supposed to go anywhere where there's children? Like, hi, nice to meet you. Oh, I love porn. Because, like, one time he was looking at porn while she was asleep and she was mad about it.
Only once?
It sounded like it from the story.
Okay. Doesn't everyone... Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was...
That is weird. Okay.
I left with a lot more questions than answers.
You generally do watching that show.
Oh, this is not a solid marriage.
No.
But when they showed the little clip at the end, they seemed fine.
Okay.
Despite... I don't get it.
Everyone has their thing, I guess.
This is just a species in decline.
This might be just, a symptom of that.
It's like the empire is really beyond crumbled.
People are willing to tattoo I love porn
on their husband's forearm forever. And it was actually, like, kind of well done.
Okay, that's kind of the worst, is when the tattoos are really well done, because you're like, that's going to be hard to remove.
Yeah.
Or cover up.
It was, like, in multiple colors, which I know makes it harder, so I was like, oh, poor guy.
Yeah.
You might really be stuck with that.
He's going to end up with a flower on his forearm. Underneath it, you can faintly read, I love porn.
Yes, exactly. Oh, dear. Well, we should talk about Unsolved Mysteries, because this episode's great.
This episode is actually great, and I'm really looking forward to getting your take on the first one. So this is, if you're following along at home, we watch on Amazon. Our evil overlords have us bought and paid for. Season 4, Episode 3.
And guess what we're starting with, everyone?
Amnesia. Okay.
Yeah.
Here is something wild that is happening this season. Last week, we had a story about someone who ran away,
ditched town with the clothes on his back
to start a new life. Something we say never happens. Someone may actually have amnesia.
I mean, we never said no one has amnesia. Just the rate that Unsolved Mysteries keeps guessing people have amnesia seems unrealistic.
Yeah, and I stand by that.
But maybe this one dude had amnesia. That's believable. But it does seem like season 4 really wants us to eat our words.
A little bit. But
Why come for us so hard, season 4? What did we do?
Complain about this show too much.
Oh, yeah.
So the opening of this episode is a bit unusual. I want to call it a cold open, which it's not, because you do get the little opening credit thing.
But it's not the usual opening.
Usually we open with, like, Robert Stack as an introduction, or you get a little bit of a, I don't know, something. There's like a standard opening. And this one actually had me very confused at first, to the point where I exited out of the episode and went back in, thinking that I had accidentally fast forwarded, because how it opens is with the reenactment, and then it cuts to this guy who the mystery is about, like, talking to the camera, which almost never happens. Usually we get maybe a little bit of a reenactment, but then we go to Robert Stack.
It's a very dramatic opening.
It's extremely dramatic, and it's kind of cinematic in a way, where like this is about amnesia, and it kind of gets you confused. So I don't know if that was their intention, but
the guy that has amnesia is reenacting the scene where he's in a hospital bed, wakes up, doesn't understand where he is, his name, what's happening. How traumatic must that have been to reenact? This guy who's still suffering from amnesia is lying in bed going, I'm scared. I don't know where I am. What's happening? And they're like, do you know your name? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
They had him reenact that? Seems cruel.
It does seem cruel. Okay, so here's the story. On January 28th, 1991, a young man was found wandering through the desert 30 miles outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. He wore 3 layers of clothing, carried no identification, and said that he had been there for at least 3 days. Upon his discovery, he was rushed to the hospital and treated for exposure and dehydration. While there, he was diagnosed with psychogenic amnesia, a form of amnesia caused by emotional trauma. The staff gave him the name of Tyler and enrolled him in a state program to provide him with housing and employment because he had no clue who he was.
Which is nice.
So Tyler, quote unquote, Tyler, is interviewed for the show, and he said it was like he was staring at a blank piece of paper when he woke up. He was confused. He didn't know his name. He didn't know where he was, who he was. He didn't recognize anyone around him, which sounds like a very scary experience. So there was no missing persons reports matching his description, and his fingerprints weren't on record anywhere. Doctors found only 2 clues to point to his past life: evidence of hairline fractures on both of the knuckles of his hands, and what they believed was a gunshot wound to his right thigh.
Which, do we ever get an explanation for that?
No.
So interesting.
I have a little bit of information to talk about at the end that I found on Google, but there's really not much. So this whole story is wild. All right, then, while talking with a fellow patient who had lived in San Diego, California, Tyler got the eerie feeling that he had once lived there too, but the recollections were vague and lacked detail. So, after being put under hypnosis, memories began flooding back to him. Tyler's interviewed for the show and describes the experience of hypnosis as giving life to what were previously detached memories. He began to remember details about the beaches of California and nearby military bases. And when you hear him talk about this, it's like he's trying to recite as many details as he can.
Yeah, he knows all these facts.
Right. So he becomes convinced that he at least lived in San Diego for a time. Under hypnosis, he experienced a vivid memory of flying over San Diego, and he became convinced that he knew how to pilot an airplane. This is bonkers.
So he gets to get in a plane with a flight instructor to see if he can fly a plane. And I would have loved to hear this phone call when he calls up the flight school to set this up.
I cannot believe anyone let him fly a plane. So he felt that getting behind the controls of a plane might trigger additional memories. So he goes up with a flight instructor, and Robert Stack says he, quote, puts his uncanny knowledge to the test. The flight instructor lets him land the plane. This is a person who claims to have no memory of his past. He just sort of remembers flying over San Diego, and he's pretty sure he knows how to fly a plane.
And they were just like, oh yeah, that's fine. I'll get in the plane with you. That's how confident I am that you'll be able to land a plane, which I don't know, I've heard it's quite hard to do.
Robert Stack says the instructor concluded that although a little rusty, Tyler had definitely flown before.
Which is good, because you let him fly a plane.
Shouldn't you figure that out before you give him... What Robert Stack says is that he was given the controls and allowed to land the plane. That is bonkers to me. I mean,
I just really want to hear him call up like, hello, so-and-so flight school. Yeah, so I don't know my name. I don't have any ID.
Presumably I don't have like do you have like a license like to fly a plane? Like, do you have to pull out like a flyer's license?
I have no idea. I mean, I guess because the flight instructor's in the plane, it's probably fine. But
well, and I wonder if they have, like when you're learning how to drive and the passenger side has like a brake pedal.
Right.
So I wonder if like that's the equivalent to that in a plane.
The guy could have just like taken over. Probably. I mean, let's say yes because it's terrifying. But I really like. Oh yeah, so I think I know how to fly a plane.
I'd like to test it out.
Would you let me try? And they were just like, you got $500. Sure, come on.
I just call up a flight school and be like, I think I know how to fly a plane. Can I give it a shot?
Also, I have no ID to like check in with.
Prove who I am. I mean, this would never. I mean, I would hope security wise that this would never be allowed to happen. That you could just, any rando without an ID could just get behind a plane. I don't know. Anyway, it's wild. So as time went on, more and more of Tyler's past abilities began to come back to him. Despite not knowing his real name, he discovered that he could dismantle and rebuild a car engine. How
did he discover that?
I think so. The reenactment made me think that the job that he had. So there was some sort of
he's working as a mechanic.
I think he was working in a
shop.
Maybe he was changing oil or something. Okay. I'm not really sure, but they sort of show him working with a bunch of other people as if that was him at work. Although they never said so much, so I'm making an assumption. All right. He also possessed advanced skills in scuba diving, martial arts, and computer programming. How he discovered that, I can't explain.
He decided, you know what, I probably know how to scuba dive, put on a scuba suit, went under the sea, like karate chopped a shark, and then was like, yeah, I was probably a spy in my life.
Karate chopped a shark.
Yeah. I think in one of the Tomb Raider movies, Angelina Jolie punches a shark in the face and then it gets her to ride it to the surface or something.
That's what he did.
Yeah.
That's how he discovered he could scuba dive.
And had martial arts skills.
So a lot of his knowledge suggested that he might have a military past, including he knew details of specific attack planes, but no record of anyone matching his description could be found in like military databases. Okay, so the update is where things get even more bonkers. So in the update, Robert Stack tells us that Tyler's case had taken on new urgency because the state program that provided his job and housing had been abruptly cut off. Unfortunately or fortunately, the case is solved. Robert Stack says that it came to a, quote, poignant and unsettling conclusion.
What a phrase.
On the night of the broadcast, a man contacted the telecenter and said that he was Tyler's father. Tyler's real name is Arthur Paul Beale. Although he goes by Paul, he was married, had 2 children, and lived in Boise, Idaho before losing his memory. We see very emotional footage of Tyler/Paul calling his mother. Actually, he first received a call from Unsolved Mysteries, like their producers or something, because they had fact-checked the information. They called to let him know, and you can actually sort of hear the phone conversation, and you see Tyler react to it or Paul react to it in real time.
Because Unsolved Mysteries has a camera at his house, like where he's watching the show. Mm-hmm. So when this tip comes in, I think before the show's even aired, they're like recording his response, and his face when he finds out he has a wife and 2 children is like, blah.
Yeah, we might need to talk about his facial expressions a little bit in a second. So he also cries while telling his mother over the phone that he is scared because he doesn't remember her. A short time after contacting his mother and stepfather, Las Vegas police show up at his apartment and arrest him for grand larceny.
Of frozen food.
He was wanted in Boise for stealing a shipment of frozen food from a food supply company that he worked for as a salesman. On January 5th, 1991, he went to Las Vegas to sell food, but 3 weeks later, on January 25th, he and the food showed up in Boulder City. He was questioned by police and told about the potential charges against him if it wasn't returned to Boise. He said that he would head there immediately, but 3 days later, he was discovered wandering aimlessly in the desert. Some believe he never had amnesia, but faked it in order to avoid prosecution. Paul's mother, Lynn, traveled to Las Vegas to post bail for him. They are reunited, and you get footage of this in the show, although he claimed that he could not remember her. The reunion was emotional but awkward, is what Robert Stack says.
Way to tell it like it is, Stack.
After returning to Boise, he spent 90 days in jail for petty theft. His criminal case is now closed. According to relatives and associates of his, he suffered a heart attack in November 2007, leaving him in a minimally conscious state. Whether his amnesia was genuine or faked will possibly never be determined. So I Googled this case, and I didn't really find anything, like a lot of the times that's the case with Unsolved Mysteries. But apparently there is someone who has continually posted on the Unsolved Mysteries message boards claiming to be his ex-wife.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this can't be fact-checked because they're just, like, randomly, anonymously posting on a message board. But I wanted to read some of the comments. Take this with a grain of salt. This may not actually be his wife, but... they left a lot of comments. So the one that a lot of people point to, if you look at like the Reddit page, is this post that listed 8 reasons why he was faking it.
Okay.
One, this person who claims to be his ex-wife says, I was contacted by Unsolved Mysteries the night that the episode aired, and I gave them all of my contact information, including the fact that he had 2 small children. However, he never inquired about his children. He had 3 phone numbers given to him. One was for his father in Idaho, the person who originally identified him, my number, and his mother's number. Instead of calling his father, the person that identified him, or the woman who could let him speak to his children, he chose to call his mother, who would be the most likely to believe his story. Who knows? They claim that the reunion scene, when he gets bailed out in Unsolved Mysteries, you can see that his body language was such that he recognized his mother, but holds himself stiff to act like he doesn't.
I don't know that I buy that.
I don't know either. When he went back to Boise to clear up the theft charges, he repeatedly made mistakes when interacting with his father. They don't say what those mistakes were. People that he previously knew showed up at his court hearing, and he initially made eye contact and started to wave, but then he stopped himself and quickly looked away. He then refused to look in their direction ever again. He chose to stay west instead of returning to his family in the Midwest. His sister's mother and stepfather lived in Iowa. His children were also in Iowa. But it sounds like he didn't make much of an effort to have a relationship with them, if this is true. He always swore that he didn't get his memory back, but on one visit he made to see the children, he became excited about a Taco John still being in business because it was his favorite place to eat when he was in high school.
Well, that's just
and then
sad.
They say that he also made numerous mistakes every time that I spoke to him. The one that I found interesting, because people on the message board were asking about his military past. So they were interacting with this person and saying, can you tell us if he was ever actually in the military? Because he apparently had a bullet hole in his leg. And their answer wasn't like totally sufficient to my...
Okay.
But here's what I'm going to read it for you anyway. He graduated high school in 1986, and his entry into the Navy was delayed because he contacted mono spring/summer 1986. He was a sonar tech in the Navy. He was stationed in San Diego from 1986 to 87, and from there he went to Long Beach, where he was from 1988 to 1990. He broke his ankle playing softball spring of 1987 and spent most of his time in the military on limited duty. He did not have any sort of flight training. I met him in San Diego
That's weird.
early 1987, and he was there when he broke... Oh, I don't really understand this sentence. He broke his ankle, and we actually started dating after he returned from recuperation. We got married in September, right before I was due to be transferred to the Great Lakes Naval Base. Those were the days before cell phones and internet, and the reason to get married was because otherwise we would never see each other. I was 19. He didn't bother to tell his mother until after we were married that he had a fiance back home. When he got married to this person. I was going to get an annulment, but then I discovered I was pregnant. He received a medical discharge from the Navy and enrolled in Boise State in January 1990. I became annoyed with his multiple girlfriends and left him and moved home to Iowa in February of 1990.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So apparently, this person claims that he always has like women on the side. But they also claim again later on that he never had any flight training, and that the speculation that he had some sort of special ops training is completely bogus. So I don't know if this person is for real or not.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So...
All right, when I was watching this, I was going, no one is faking amnesia to get out of 90 days in jail. And if you are faking amnesia, why the fuck go on Unsolved Mysteries and have people try to identify you? That's going to end the ruse right there.
That was my main question. And the only thing I could think of is he was trying to concoct, maybe he felt like at this point he was too far into this lie, that the only way to get back was to...
But he didn't even want to see his wife and kid, just to be like, oh, I remember now, and go about your day.
It's true. And that is the weird part, is that if this poster online is correct and is actually his ex-wife, then he didn't seem like he had much of a relationship with his kids. So
I don't understand going on Unsolved Mysteries if he's faking it. Like, what is there to gain? It just seems like it's only going to make it harder.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because now we're all speculating about you.
But I don't know. And I don't know who fakes amnesia to get out of 90 days in jail. However...
Who steals frozen food?
That is... The whole thing is quite bizarre.
I was thinking he had some sort of break when he was supposed to be delivering this food. Who knows what happened to it? And then...
that does seem like it could be true.
Like, all right, I once met someone who had just, like, once gotten on a bus, and then, like, their family found them 3 months later, and they had no idea what had happened during that time. They just had a break.
Wow.
They don't know...
What happened?
What happened during those 3 months.
Huh. That does seem more... Because he had to... If he was faking this whole thing, he had to have... He put himself through a horrible ordeal. I think it was like 9 months or something. It may have even been longer than that between when he was discovered and when Unsolved Mysteries picked up his story. Anyway, it was a long enough time where he was having to... He didn't know... he didn't have contact with anyone. He was living in some sort of program that seemed like it was unstable because they just lost his funding and then just completely went away. He just had a job chosen for him. He didn't have any friends. He couldn't drive because he didn't have a social security number. He wasn't eligible to get a social security number because he couldn't prove his identity. He can't get a driver's license. He didn't have his birth certificate.
I mean, maybe he is faking this and really hadn't thought it through, but that's gonna severely impact your life. It's not like he made so much money off of this frozen food,
right,
that he can just live off that.
Yeah, I
just don't see why.
That's the weird thing.
If all these rumors are true, he was just kind of a scoundrel, and maybe it wasn't really about the food. Maybe he just wanted to bail on his family anyway. But why go on Unsolved Mysteries then?
Yeah, you can bail on your family. Like, doing all
go
that.
Go be a dirtbag. Don't involve Unsolved Mysteries. That's just gonna make it harder.
The other thing that I thought about when watching the episode a second time this morning was he was in a remote area in the desert. Like, it's not for certain that he was... Like, he couldn't have known that he would be found.
Right. And he had no water, no supplies. He's wearing way too many clothes. He was probably severely dehydrated. He approaching heat stroke. Like, he could have died. So I feel like something psychological happened. And maybe it was that he didn't want to face responsibility, or maybe he just didn't want to go back to his family. But I don't think it's entirely made up.
Multiple doctors diagnosed him as having legitimate amnesia. So not only do you have to, if you're going to say that he's faking it, now he's such a mastermind that he could fool medical professionals as well.
This one cop was saying, like, oh, it's easy to fake amnesia. You just keep saying, I don't know. And I was like, I don't actually think that would be easy to do at all.
It wouldn't be easy for me.
To keep that up every day? No.
I don't think so.
So
I'm unsure, but I lean towards, I think why would you put yourself through
this? It has to be
true
to some degree. Maybe he started to get his memory back and didn't want to admit it because he didn't like it.
It could be.
Like, maybe he didn't really want to go back to his life.
Yeah.
But I don't see why he would just be wandering around the desert for days so that he could steal some frozen food. That's the worst criminal plan I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, he really could have died.
He could have. And I think when he was taken to the hospital, he was unconscious. So he he was close to death.
This guy with the mullets just saves him. And I don't know. It's very interesting. I would be interested in hearing people's thoughts about it.
Me too.
Okay. Let's move on.
To another kind of
crazy this is also story. An interesting one.
I'm going to have a sip of polar water.
You do it. This is the case of June Maloney. And it goes all the way back to March 1967. And it's in Rochester, New York. So she was 27 years old, and she leaves her husband, Joe. They've been together for 5 years, and he's abusive, emotionally and physically. And she just has enough. So we see her like they're arguing. She's going to work. She's like, oh my God, we'll talk about this later. I hate you. And we learn that their custody agreement was going to be that she would have the kids, but he was allowed to see them whenever. It was informal. It was not enforced by the court. But this breakup was not very amicable. I don't think Joe appreciated that she left, even though he was trash.
Yeah, absolutely not. And what I don't appreciate is that his friend who's interviewed for this show, this like amateur chemist guy.
It's so weird. This gets weird real quick.
I don't even know what to say about him, but I think it's irresponsible for Unsolved Mysteries to be asking him to describe the abuse that she experienced.
He's like really downplaying it.
Yeah, and he's extremely cavalier about it, and the language he uses is offensive.
It's gross. Also, I cannot recall the last time I heard someone use the phrase Irish temper in like any seriousness. That's some like weird old-timey discrimination you haven't heard in a while. It's like, oh, he wasn't that abusive, but he did have the old Irish temper.
Yeah.
I was like, are you for real?
Yeah, I hate this guy.
Is this 1890?
Yeah.
What are you talking about, Irish temper?
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, this dude, Joe, dirtbag, has this weird friend, Neil Dunkenberg, who's an amateur chemist.
He has an amateur chemistry lab in his mom's basement. Is this a meth lab? Does he have a meth lab in his mom's basement?
No, I think he's just this like nerd who fancies himself a genius and is like, I'm gonna be this and I'm gonna discover something, or I'm gonna like. I mean, maybe he's making meth. I don't know. It's the 60s though. I don't know if people were making meth yet.
Okay, maybe not.
But I think he like fancies himself this like very intellectual, brilliant mind, so that he's just gonna like tinker in the basement, like making chemicals change color and test tubes, and he's, you know, like, I guess you don't know, because who the fuck does that?
I don't know, but
this is the impression that I got, was that he thinks of himself as like the next great, you know, Da Vinci or something, that he's gonna like discover this thing.
So he's down there, he's taken over his poor mother's basement, and I'm sure she can't go down there. No one can go down into his lab, right? And so he's
not your house, dude.
He's down there. His mom wants to come down and like get a box out of storage or something, and he's just like,
my chemicals,
Mom,
my experiments.
I'm doing an experiment, Mom. Get out of here.
Like, this reminds me of Dexter's Laboratory.
Oh my God.
And I wish he was dressed like that. Okay, so
he has no texture.
Yeah, if only. That cartoon was so good. Okay, so obviously Dirtbag Joe, visits his friend Dirtbag Neil, the amateur chemist, and this is the story that he tells him. So Joe's like, so say I wanted to kill a dog.
Hypothetically speaking.
And I wanted it to not be traceable. You know, a thing you would worry about if you were killing a dog. That there's this dog, see, and it keeps knocking over my garbage cans. Something you should kill it for. But, the dog is owned by a police officer, so I gotta be real careful.
This is fucked up. This alone is fucked up.
Yeah, if this was true, horrible. But Neil is such a fucking dumbass that he's like, oh, you could use strychnine, or you could use this poison, but those are pretty traceable. I'd recommend this clear, tasteless, odorless liquid I have right here.
He pulls in the reenactment. He pulls out a giant beaker.
Yeah, it looks like a bottle of vodka, which it probably was for the filming. And they're like, this is how I kill all dogs that bother me. Now go away, Joe. And then only afterwards does this brilliant mastermind Neil go, that was a little fucked up. Wonder why Joe wants odorless, tasteless, untraceable poison. Totally normal question. So he advises his family not to let anyone into the lab, particularly not Joe. But then his sister is in town, and what does that bitch do? Because apparently he didn't tell her. He's like, my family it didn't work. I was like, you can't lock this shit up.
It's not your house. Also,
you can't. You have deadly chemicals just like lying around. You can't.
Yes, he could.
So anyway, his
locks
sister
hadn't been invented yet.
It was the 60s. No one had heard of locks or safes. So his sister is visiting, and Joe stops by and claims he needs to borrow something to sterilize some equipment. And she's just like, what? Okay, like the lab's this way. And you see him pour off he's like, all I need is this. That's it. He pours out a tiny bit of the vodka into a bottle and is like, thanks so much. Bye. Okay, so now he has this this lethal liquid that they don't tell us what it is because they're afraid will kill people. Yeah. Fair. So 2 weeks later, June goes to Joe's house for their son's 5th birthday party, and he's like acting like kind of too nice. Suspiciously nice considering their separation has not been amicable. So he goes and like makes her a drink and then is like, hey, how's that drink? She's like, fine, Joe.
He's like hovering over her, making sure she finishes it all.
How's that drink, June? And she's like, fine, Joe. Leave me alone. I'm just here for our kid. And he's like, the kid says it's his best birthday ever. Which, it's at their kid's party that he decides to poison his wife.
This guy is high trash.
Not only do you want your wife dead, but you clearly don't care about your kid. Ugh, awful. Okay. So the next day, June's friend Wanda comes to their apartment and she finds like Joe and the doctor standing outside. They tell her that June's fallen ill, and Joe tries to get Wanda to not go into the apartment, and then she's like, this isn't your house.
Get out of my fucking way.
This is where June lives, not you. You don't get to tell me what to do. So she goes in to talk to June, and June is like, yeah, the doctor says I have food poisoning, but I think it might be something else, and I don't want to be left alone with Joe. So Wanda tries to stay with her. Well, I think she does, actually. But Joe, like, gives her a really hard time about it and keeps trying to get her to leave. And then June's like, I want her here. If you really want to be helpful, go to the store and get me some pop. And he, like, very reluctantly leaves because he can't come up with a good reason why he needs to stay and watch his wife die.
Right.
So the next day, unfortunately, she slips into a coma. And she never regains consciousness. She died on June 5th, 1967. Well, the autopsy revealed that she had ingested poison, and that it was the same poison taken from Neil's lab. So 4 hours after her death, Joe was arrested for murder.
Yeah, Joe, also not great.
I mean, I guess Neil kind of lied about the untraceable part because they immediately were like, oh, she was poisoned. I wonder if he got that from that weirdo Neil. In 4 hours, they figured out it was him?
Did not take long.
This is one of the worst murders ever in terms of trying to get away with it.
He also, I mean, he might as well have been going around being like, this is poison, the way he was acting.
Right.
Completely suspicious.
Wanda's suspicious of him. June was suspicious of him.
I'm sure everyone at that party was suspicious of him.
Yeah, they're like, wait, why was he being so nice? Why did he insist she take that drink?
Yeah.
Also, doesn't he know that weirdo Neil that has a basement full of poisons? God, I hate that guy. Right? Like, 4 hours after his death.
Yeah, they
Joe,
put the pieces
you
together
are bad
real
at
fast.
crimes.
Yep.
You're bad at crimes, Joe. Okay, so he's arrested. He is convicted in September of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. He asked to be committed to the Rochester State Mental Hospital for an evaluation. What the court did not know was that he used to work there, and so he was familiar with the layout. And 2 weeks later, he managed to escape. So he disappears. 5 years later, this is where the Irish temper part was foreshadowing and not just weird discrimination.
Weird old discrimination.
Yes, weird hatred of immigrants. 5 years later, in Dublin, Ireland, the police are called to investigate a burglary at the home of a man named Michael O'Shea. And so they show them coming to the house and being like, oh, you know, we'll dust this mantle for prints, but we are going to need to take your prints too. And Michael O'Shea's like, wait, what? I was like, yeah, it's standard procedure. We'll need to rule your prints out from the home. And Michael's like, oh, yeah, that's fine. Because obviously that was Joe Maloney. Otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing this.
Yeah, of course.
So that was him.
Also, the police officer immediately sent his prints to Interpol, so he was probably acting real suspicious.
Well, I think his reaction to having his fingerprints taken, they were like, okay, why did that alarm him? Like,
seems like he has something to hide.
He's more alarmed about his phone fingerprints than the fact that he's been robbed.
Yep.
So, yeah, they immediately sent his fingerprints to Interpol and found out it was him. However, at the time, there was no extradition treaty between Ireland and the U.S. So the fact that he was wanted for, or had been convicted of murder in the U.S., there's really nothing Ireland could do about it. So he just got to stay in Ireland, which sucks. And then in 1984, that's when they made a, what should we call it?
An extradition
treaty. Yeah, so he's held at Mountjoy Prison for, I forget how long, like maybe a couple years. But then the treaty becomes void due to a legal technicality, and they have to let him go.
Yeah, it seems like the issue is like they arrested him while the treaty was still being finalized.
Yeah.
So they were just holding him, like waiting to extradite him once it was all ironed out. And then
it like falls through.
Yeah, it sort of falls through for a bit. And they had to let him go.
They had to let him go. They hadn't been able to send him to the U.S. because the treaty was, I don't understand, but whatever, they were still working it out, the details. And so they let him go. And then he is literally never seen again.
Yeah, this one kind of sucks.
End. I mean,
justice wasn't served.
He would be quite old by now, so he's probably dead, but...
Well, hopefully he found justice in the next life.
Oh, according to Unsolved Mysteries Wiki, the poison that Joe used was wood alcohol.
Interesting. Must have been quite a lot of it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I guess maybe she thought he just made her a stiff drink.
Well, yeah.
What'd you taste? If you got served
Neil
wood alcohol?
said it was tasteless, but also he said it was untraceable, and he was very wrong about that. So
Neil seems bad at chemistry, so...
Yeah, it's surprisingly no pictures of June are shown in the segment, which is a little odd. But yeah, he would be in his 80s now, so he's probably dead. You can visit June Maloney on Find a Grave if you want to pay your respects. It's very sad.
It's very sad.
Joe's the worst. I hope he is dead.
Me too. Okay, so... our next mystery is about the Shroud of Turin.
Oh, God.
And it's, I don't know, for me it was a little bit painful. I don't even know what to say about this going
You just, like, put down the thing, you're like, and I feel like that's going to be such a solid episode without this mystery.
And this mystery is so long. And
it's very long. You hear from a lot of experts and religious figures. We see a lot of shots of the Shroud of Turin. Oh my God, it's burned in my brain forever.
I don't think that anyone... It seems like the Shroud of Turin... I haven't looked up like more modern information about it because I just was bored by this. But it seems like the Shroud of Turin, spoiler alert, has been pretty readily debunked as not being authentic. Even like the Catholic Church has like said, like accepted, I don't know, we'll get to it. My point is that I don't think making fun of this is like making fun of someone's religious belief, because it seems like this is categorically not a real relic.
Yeah,
so
I would agree with that.
I think this whole thing is kind of dumb is what I'm saying, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but I don't think that... I think science has sort of proven that the Shroud of Turin is not
I don't feel like
real.
Believing in the Shroud of Turin really corresponds to believing in Jesus.
No.
Because you would believe in Jesus whether or not this ever existed, right? It's like kind of a separate...
Good point.
Hoax or relic or however you want to look at it.
Yeah. Okay.
Today we will solve the mystery. How is Jesus so white?
Okay. So, this is the case details. The face of Jesus Christ has inspired artists throughout the ages, according to Robert Stack. But how did they know what Jesus looked like? A piece of linen...
Spoiler, they didn't.
...may hold the answer. It is called the Shroud of Turin, and many believe it is the actual burial cloth of Jesus Christ. And his image was imprinted on its threads. So this segment features a lot of this dude. This is Father Kim Driesbeck Jr.
known as a priest.
This guy was, I don't know, he's a true believer in the Shroud of Turin.
Look, he tells us he thought he was going to debunk it in like 2 hours.
Yeah, he says
years later, he's still hanging on by a thread.
Good one. He says,
that didn't even make sense.
When I first began to study the Shroud of Turin, I was convinced it was a crock, and it would take me probably less than 2 hours to put away this pious fraud. After all, anyone with an IQ over 100 knows that all relics by definition are frauds. I don't really understand that statement.
What? Is that true?
I don't know. By definition, relics are frauds? I don't understand that one. I don't get that.
So that when you can like buy a tiny piece of wood from the original cross, that's not real?
Yeah, that's probably not real.
Oh my God.
It's probably not real. There's probably not that much wood
from that cross.
No, it wasn't that big. But I must admit, here I am, some 17 years later. I, who came to scoff, have stayed to pray. This guy has a way with words.
He should get a show on the ID channel, actually.
All about the Shroud of Turin?
No, just like that way of speaking that all the presenters have.
Yeah, you're right.
Where it's like not quite a pun,
He's
but just
got
like,
it.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
He says, my own personal belief is that the shroud is probably authentic. Okay. So the shroud was first exhibited publicly in France during the Renaissance. No one seemed to know where it came from. Then in 1578 AD, the shroud was moved to Turin, Italy, where it was rarely shown in public. 3 centuries later, in 1898, the shroud was photographed for the first time. According to Father, I can't pronounce his last name, it's Driesbach.
Sure.
The photographer's negatives showed more detail than could be seen by the naked eye. He says that he was to write of his experience years later and would never forget that as he lifted the glass plate, he believed he was the first person in 2,000 years to see the face of Jesus of Nazareth.
I mean, it makes sense that the negative is increase the contrast, so
Right.
you can see more detail than you can. The shroud itself is kind of beige, and then the image of Jesus is kind of a
It also
brick
has
color.
it has some fire damage on the side, so when you're looking
Yeah,
at
when
it,
did
you
that
see
happen?
Yeah, that wherever it was must have burned down because
And then
the actual image, the human image on it is unscarred, but like on the sides you see like some fire damage.
and the nuns repaired it.
Yeah,
and then I
there's,
was like,
like,
when
some-
did that happen?
I have no idea, but there's like some triangles of cloth that were sewn on to like, I don't know, hold it together. Okay, so from that point on, the Shroud of Turin became more and more an object of scientific inquiry. Dr. Robert Buckland, a forensic pathologist, has examined life-size photographic negatives of the shroud and says the body shows a number of injuries. On the head, we see a series of blood stains around the forehead, high in the scalp, and along the posterior portion of the scalp. These are consistent with the application of a crown or cap of thorns. On the chest area, there's a rather unique wound. It is quite consistent with a puncture type wound made by an implement which entered the chest cavity and produced an outflow of blood and water. In the region of the left wrist,
Do you
there's
know
a
how you
puncture
stab
wound.
a person and water comes out?
He's clear. This guy is clearly a believer as well. So I think he's seeing what he wants to see. In the left region of the wrist, there's a puncture wound, which was clearly made by some implement, which passed into the tissues of the wrist and produced bleeding. So the crucifixion of Jesus has traditionally been depicted with nails driven through the palms. But according to Father Driesbach, modern research has confirmed that at the time of Jesus' death, nails were driven through the victim's wrists.
I mean, if you think about it, if you put a nail through the hand,
The weight of your body.
that's not going to support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
comes up in the very 90s movie Stigmata, if anybody remembers that movie, which I thought was so cool, that she, starts exhibiting the stigmata, and one of it is on the wrist instead of the palm, because if you were to drive a, big heavy nail through your wrist, that would support your body a lot better than your flimsy little hand.
yeah, it's gruesome, but if you were to try and hold someone's body up with nails through the wrist, you would just
fall
rip
down, yeah.
You would just rip straight through
Yeah.
the hand and your body would fall down. So, this is the quote from this guy. I'm just going to read it. The Romans did enough of these, sometimes 500 a day, they became excellent anatomists, and like a butcher, they knew where the bones were. They put it in the wrists, and it held the body and held it well.
I don't know that you really need to be an expert to drive a gigantic nail through a wrist, but...
Also, if you're doing 500 a day, yeah, you figure out what works and what doesn't. Is that your sound effects?
That's me hammering people into crosses
In
all day long. Ho hum.
In 1978, the shroud was made available to a number of scientists for the first time. Using particles lifted from the shroud with adhesive tape, biophysicist John Heller and chemist Alan Alder determined that there was blood on the cloth. They found chemical evidence of severe torture consistent with crucifixion. Their findings, however, are not universally accepted. Some scientists, including Dr. Wallace McCrone, have claimed that the shroud is a forgery, the work of a highly skilled artist who painted with tiny brush strokes. He says that when I first started working on it, I expected it to be authentic, and I looked for bodily fluid. That's where I started. But the red turned out to be red ochre and another pigment, vermilion. Common artist pigments. There's no question in my mind that it is a painting.
Yeah, if you ever look at tubes of oil paint, you might wonder why they have kind of weird names like red ochre and vermilion. And those are artist pigment terms that go way, way back to like Renaissance, maybe even earlier, when all of your paint pigments would have been made from natural things like minerals.
Yep.
So that makes sense that they would be able to track that down and say, yeah, this is not blood or a miracle. This is actually paint.
It's actually paint. However, Father Dreisbach disagrees with that theory. He says many copies of the shroud were made. Okay, this guy is a little bit in denial, but it seems like he's devoted a lot of his life to this. He says, it was felt by pious people at the time that if you touched the copy of the original, it would give the copy extra sanctity. This is called brandiums, the technical name. When they were touched, of course, some of that pigment ended up on the shroud, and that is what has been discovered. But it is not responsible for the image, let alone the whole body image, total front and total back.
I mean, how do we know that we're looking at the original and not a copy?
I don't know.
What happened to all these copies?
I think his theory is that people touch the copy, and then they touch the shroud, and then they touch the copy, and then that was supposed to like transfer the energy like from the original. So
they got red ochre and vermilion on the original.
Yeah.
Seems
like a stretch.
Really didn't understand when someone said that the chemical composition of something they tested reflected severe torture. And I was like, what type of scientific process can you come out and go,
I don't know.
This person was tortured? What?
I think they're trying to suggest that the volume of bodily fluids that they found on the shroud is what signified to them that there was torture involved because he bled a lot. But
also no blood was found?
Well, they claim that they did find blood, but then this other guy says that he didn't. So I don't know.
Okay.
Seems like they probably didn't.
Do you believe that the resurrection caused a burst of radiation? That's something I had not heard before, but maybe I'm just dumb.
I can't say that resurrections don't cause a burst of radiation.
Good point, Samantha.
I think this is just like a
theory of how... I guess this is just believed that the resurrection caused a burst of radiation.
People don't get resurrected, so there's no way to test this theory.
But that's interesting because we weren't even aware of radiation until fairly recently in human history. But so that is what caused the image in theory. Is that Jesus died,
claim,
they wrapped him in the cloth this weird way where it like started at his head and went down his body on his feet and then like flapped over to his back. Yeah. And then they put him in the cave and then the radiation happens and that causes the image and then he rolls that rock and then he comes out and he's like, guess what, everybody? I'm back. It's time to party. And
it's time to party. That's a direct quote from the Bible.
From the Bible. Prove me wrong. And I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, I think so. If you believe that the Shroud of Turin is authentic, you have to have some way to explain how there's a perfect image of his face, right? Because it's not like it's painted in blood. His face is imposed onto the linen. So there has to be some sort of way that happened. And I think the radiation is the way to explain that.
I don't think you need that when you're dealing with holy stuff. Don't you just say miracle?
That's what I would think, but people want it to be proven by science. So how
does a statue of the Virgin Mary cry blood? Miracle? I don't know. How does the Virgin Mary appear in a tortilla or a piece of toast? Miracle? Like you don't need a
I think the scale of the Shroud of Turin and the Virgin Mary appearing in a piece of toast is a little bit
people take both of those things very seriously. I don't know.
That's very true. But I do think that people that are strongly trying to authenticate the Shroud of Turin want like science to back them up. So I think you're gonna look for radiation did it.
I think they should examine their faith. Make sure it's devout enough.
Yeah, maybe they should. Okay.
I love the idea that someone would be taking any sort of religious or spiritual advice from me. Like, this is right. I really need to read about my... Like, what? What a terrible idea.
This is not the podcast for those people. All right. In recent times, scientists have used computer technology to study the shroud.
I found this quite odd.
Optical specialist Kevin Moran claimed his computer analysis revealed that the image has unique optical qualities that confirm the shroud's authenticity. This is what he says. When I take a normal photograph and he shows like a photo of a little girl, you can immediately see a very distorted figure. The nose with respect to the cheek is totally distorted, and this is because it is a reflected image. This image is made by reflected light. This is not what we see in the shroud. The shroud is a very different type of image. The image immediately comes into a three-dimensional form. The eyes, nose, mouth relationship are all clearly recognizable. The image on the shroud is...
No, they are not. That is
so unique that it almost enters the scientific faith factor all by itself. There simply is no way that we can duplicate this image even today, and people have certainly tried. This is funny because later someone duplicates it, but whatever. We'll get to that in a second.
I feel like all this guy has done is prove the Shroud of Turin is in a photograph, and then we go, no shit.
It's a painting. I don't know. This is...
If it's a miracle or if it's a hoax, either way, no one's claiming it's a photograph. It's not going to respond to this weird scanner thing the way a photograph would. Of course not.
This guy claims to be a scientist, and I guess anyone can say they're a scientist, but...
Wait, remember on that Leonard Nimoy show where that person was a scientist and they were finding that objects glow? Like,
right.
It reminds me a lot of that.
Or they were talking to plants, yeah. So he's taking a photograph, like a modern photograph, and... he's running this optical scan on it, and then he is running the optical scan on the shroud. I mean, granted, I think he probably uses a photo of the shroud, not necessarily the shroud itself, because you can't really access that. But still, they're two different things.
Yeah, it's not a photograph, guy.
You can't compare...
Way to prove that.
Like, even if, whether it's authentic or not, it's not, you can't compare it to a photograph. I don't know.
It's like, and look at the way
weird.
the hair rises. I was like, what does that prove, if anything?
Okay, so in addition to Moran's findings, believers claim that the absence of brush strokes on the shroud proved that it's not a painting. However, skeptics have pointed out that Leonardo da Vinci's brush strokes were often invisible. In an effort to resolve the controversy surrounding the shroud, the Vatican allowed samples to be cut from its outer edges in 1988 for carbon dating. 3 universities were given a tiny piece of linen. The thing about Da Vinci, which they mention in like one sentence, is that some people think that Da Vinci was commissioned to make this because...
people just like putting Da Vinci at the center of like any Catholic conspiracy thing. There's no evidence
maybe there's
to
more
suggest
to
he
that
had anything to do with it.
The brush strokes, but it's never brought up. So
Da Vinci didn't invent tiny brush strokes. Like visible brush strokes are a much more modern...
So Dr.
That's not the way... Oh my god. That's not the way paintings in the Renaissance worked. He didn't have visible brushstroke.
Dr. Paul Damon at the University of Arizona headed up the carbon dating team in the United States. His findings placed the shroud's origin between 1290 and 1360 AD.
Which lines up with it being shown for the first time in France.
Yeah, so he says within less than 5 minutes, we could see that it could not possibly be 1st century.
I love that guy was like, yeah, immediately we knew.
The difference between 14th century and 1st century is so great that you could see it within minutes. In the first measurement, we made quite a few measurements, like 16, but that was plenty. So I think what he's saying is that, like, there's such a big difference between 1st century and 14th century that it's clearly...
Yeah, there was no debate.
Yeah, you cannot
for the carbon dating.
So the Vatican accepted the results of Paul Damon's carbon dating. At the same time, carbon dating tests in Switzerland and England confirmed their findings. Since then, questions have been raised about the carbon dating process. The Vatican has refused to allow further testing, but it did approve a major restoration. Critics say that restoration will make further research even more difficult, but for true believers, this is Robert Stack's quote, further testing will make little difference. For them, the shroud has always been a matter of faith.
Yeah.
Which is
That
true.
makes sense. I don't even see why you need this.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's a
that.
symbol. I don't know that it has to be literally the cloth that Jesus wrapped in.
Well, it still has historical significance.
Yeah.
Even being its true thing. So, I don't know.
The priest was saying, what if... So we talked about how at some point the shroud got burned and had to be repaired. And so the priest puts forth this theory, what if the carbon dating is not from the, like... is part of the repair cloth and not the original cloth. But... I feel like
you can clearly see which part is the repaired and which part is the original.
I also feel like the Vatican would be invested in it being old and would make sure to give them the old cloth.
Yeah, I think this guy is stretching it a little bit because it's not like you couldn't tell what was new and what was original and what was added later. It's very clear. It's very easy to tell. There's like clear like patches that were added to it,
and they're not that big.
And it's not like they blended the linen so closely together that you couldn't tell what was new and what was old. Like, I reject that theory.
Oh, Shroud of Turin.
Yeah. So that was the Shroud of Turin. Oh, I wanted to... someone pointed out that... So we were talking a second there about, like, why the depictions of Jesus are so white. And someone posted, like, a Snopes article that I read through about how there's, like, some conspiracy theory that the depictions of Jesus were this guy from Italy. But what I found interesting is, have you seen this, like, BBC thing where they, like, made, like, an artist recreation of, like, what a Galilean man would look like?
Oh, interesting.
So in 2001, forensic anthropologist Richard, I think his last name is Nave, created a model of a Galilean man for a BBC documentary called Son of God. Working on the basis of an actual skull found in the region, he did not claim that his model showed Jesus' face, but rather offered it as a means of promoting people to consider a Jesus who looked like a man of his time and place, since the Bible does not describe Jesus as having distinctive features. So you can look this up. I remember when this sort of photo went viral and all of the clickbait said, like, this is the face of Jesus, which it's clearly not. It's just a man.
Right.
Probably what people look like at that time period. And of course, this is not a white dude. If this guy was walking down the street in America today, he might face some discrimination.
But he didn't have long, flowing blonde hair and blue eyes.
And very pale skin. No, he did not. Huh. So I thought this was interesting, to take a look at what Jesus probably really would have looked like. And surprise, it looks nothing like the image on the Shroud of Turin, which looks like an old white dude.
Right. Yeah.
So
that face that is used to promote white supremacy.
Yeah.
That you think of as Jesus.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, and you can look up The Galilean Man is the name of the artist recreation, and the BBC documentary was called Son of God.
My mom always points out that Jesus probably had terrible teeth.
Yeah, probably.
He's always shown with great teeth.
I'm sure he did not have smooth porcelain skin.
Yeah, probably not. He probably smelled terrible.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. He
by our standards.
Had sticks in his beard. Yeah, no.
So there's something to think about on this sacrilegious show. How bad did Jesus smell?
Is that the title of this episode? No. We'll get demonetized.
Yeah. No thanks. Okay, we've got one last case because this is a solid episode, so you get 4 cases. This case takes place in Burr Hill, which is a rural area outside of Washington, D.C. It's very not populous. So this is the case of Ethel Kidd, and she was building her retirement home there with her husband, Gilbert. So
what a cute old man named Gilbert.
I know. So this was in 1988. Their children and grandchildren lived nearby. They were really looking forward to their retirement years with their family and getting away from... I'm not sure if they lived in Washington, D.C. before, but Robert Stack kind of made it sound like they wanted to get away from, like, the hustle and bustle of city life and kind of, relax. So on Wednesday, April 12th, 1989, the construction on the house was almost finished. Ethel was spending a lot of time there, just sort of getting things ready. She visited her daughter earlier that day. She returned home about 2 and is seen by a witness getting her mail from the mailbox. Just someone, like, driving by. She waves. Okay, so that's around 2. The next morning, her daughter calls her at 7:30 a.m., but she didn't answer, which is weird because she's an old lady and was usually up early and always answered her phone. So her answering machine picked up, which her daughter found quite odd, but she assumed that she was on her way over for a morning cup of coffee and then never showed up. So 2 hours later, at 9:30, her son-in-law, Thomas, drives by her house only to see that the car is still in the driveway. So she's not answering her phone, but she's not out. So he decides to stop and see, if anything's wrong. As he's approaching the house, he finds a road atlas in the yard, and he picks it up, assuming that she's dropped it to bring it back to her. But when he goes up to the house, the door isn't locked, which was very unusual for her. Apparently, she kept it locked all the time, even during the day. So he goes in, it's not locked, and she's not home, and there's no signs of a struggle, there's nothing. So investigators are contacted, and it seems like immediately did this really wide search, They had volunteers, a helicopter. Yeah, it was from the air, people walking all around this area, trying to find her. So this really widespread search takes place. Then 8 days later, a hunter is in the woods only 3 miles from her house, and this is an area that had already been thoroughly searched. He finds a very disturbing scene, which is shown in the reenactment.
It's rough.
That Ethel is dead and tied to a tree standing upright and just left there, like, facing this logging road.
Yeah, it was a pretty well-trafficked area. It wasn't, like, out off the beat. It was off the beaten path, but it wasn't in, like, a super remote area, and it had been searched before.
Yeah, so the police officer said there's no way we could have missed this. It's not like it's so dense that we wouldn't have seen it.
She was tied to a tree. It wasn't like she was under a pile of leaves.
Right.
So,
and also, even if the search party had somehow missed her, people using this logging road and this other nearby road probably would have seen her. So there's no way she could have been there that entire 8 days. And actually, the evidence suggested that she had been refrigerated for most of that time.
Ugh.
Unfortunately, she had been raped, strangled, and had been dead for about 7 days. And there was the lack of decomposition and also the lack of insects that sort of suggested to investigators that she had been refrigerated. The cord that was used to tie her was strangely something that's only used in hospitals and hotel draperies. It's not like product that's available for the public. It's only like available wholesale, I guess. They also found car fibers in her clothes. But the most important piece of evidence was actually inside that road atlas, that there were these very sexual notes in it, like kind of commands, and they show you some of them, but they're also blurred out. And
yeah, you can't really tell.
Yeah.
They describe them as flashcards, which is...
They seemed like parts of a piece of paper that if I wrote we're gonna have sex now, and then I would hold it up to you.
Yeah, they posited that this person was using it to communicate with sex workers that they were
through a car window or something. I don't know. But
it's odd.
There was also a checklist that seemed like it was written by the killer that said things like ID, ASAP, and it referred to oh my goodness, I wrote this down. It referred to this book called The Paper Trip, which was a book about how to obtain a new identity.
Yeah, suspicious.
So
also there was abbreviations in there that they aren't certain what it was, but it seems like it was handcuff.
Yeah, because it says HC, maybe TP, and then SG. So they were saying handcuffs, maybe the last one stun gun.
Right.
Anyway, so this seems
pretty premeditated. Someone was set out to do this.
Yeah, and it seemed like this was written by the killer, put in the road atlas, and then in a struggle he dropped the road atlas and it was left in the yard.
I recommend not taking notes on the crimes you're going to commit. I don't know.
We've seen this before.
Yeah, it seems like this can implicate you.
Well, actually, so this is how this person was caught. They showed this note on Unsolved Mysteries, and someone recognized that handwriting.
It was distinctive.
And they called in. So this case is solved. It first aired in October 2nd, 1991. And the handwriting generated a tip about a suspect named Edward Wayne Beverly, who was at the time, he was already in prison for an unrelated crime, which I think was just armed robbery or burglary, not murder. He was actually about to be released, but he was recognized from the handwriting and of the list found in the atlas, and he did live in that area, but had suddenly left at the time of the murder. So he was tracked down to the prison where his DNA and fingerprints were compared to the crime scene, and they matched. So he was charged with Ethel's murder before he was released on the time he was already serving, and he was convicted of rape, abduction, and murder, and given 3 life sentences.
He was just about to get out, too.
Yeah.
When they identified him.
I mean, he had quite a mustache, but he can't win because he's an absolute dirtbag. He ended up dying in prison in late 2008. Unfortunately, Ethel's widower Gilbert passed away in 2006 at the age of 71. Her son Gilbert Jr. and son-in-law Thomas have also since passed away.
Oh.
I know. It's a very disturbing, very violent, senseless, horrible crime.
So horrible.
I really feel for Ethel. That's a terrible, terrible death.
Yeah, and her family.
Yeah, her poor family that was just looking forward to spending some time in her retirement with them, and she didn't get a chance to do that. So
really unfortunate.
It's a kind of a reminder to not put off doing the things you want to do because you might not get a chance.
It's a good reminder.
Yeah.
All right, should we rate this episode?
Let's do it.
Okay, reenactments.
I thought they were pretty good.
Well, okay, we were supposed to start with mysteriousness, but whatever.
Mysteriousness.
Yeah,
mysteriousness. Okay.
Mysteriousness. Yeah, I'm trying to... The Shroud of Turin, not mysterious to me. Is Tyler faking it, or is he actually having amnesia?
True.
That wasn't necessarily the mystery. It sort of ended up that way.
We have 2 solved murders, but they weren't solved at the time.
Right. So maybe like halfway. Maybe in the
I'm
middle
giving it a
for
sideways.
mysteries. Okay, reenactments.
I thought they were pretty good.
The reenactments were good.
Yeah.
Like I said at the beginning, like the opening reenactment sort of puts you off balance. I don't know if that was their intention, but it's really effective.
It's very intense.
And it makes you sort of feel like you don't really know what's going on, and that's how Tyler felt. So Paul felt.
And the reenactment of the search for Ethel, you have helicopters, you have
an aerial shot.
Yeah, you have all these people fanning out over the countryside. I thought that was really well done too.
Yeah, so I'm a thumbs up. Fashion.
Kind of unremarkable.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting some solid like 90s fashion these couple episodes, but there wasn't nothing stood out necessarily to me. And Robert Stack seemed like just average. It was average Stack episode.
I did like there was a shot of him in the first mystery where there's like an ambulance in the background and they're like loading people in. That was cool.
And then you get like a close up of him and the ambulance is still in the background with the flashing lights. So not bad.
All right, sideways, I guess.
All right, overall, what are you thinking?
I'm giving it a 4.
I'm rating this a solid 4. The Shroud of Turin kind of bored me, but everything else was so good.
It's really good.
This was a really good episode.
I kind of wish the Shroud of Turin wasn't in there, but I didn't dislike it as much as I was expecting it to. When I saw that mystery was in this episode, I was like, oh, great. And they did kind of move it along. It didn't drag so much.
They had a lot of information to give you, so at least there was a lot to keep you occupied.
It didn't feel stretched out, I guess. They did cover a lot of like historical facts and then the sort of hypotheses about it. So,
and this was a good variety sort of pack of mysteries too.
I liked the amnesia case a lot. I thought both of my murder mysteries, though they're horrible murders, were well presented, interesting cases, just a little something different, even though they're terrible.
This is a solid 4 from me.
Yeah, 4 mysteries, variety. The pacing is good.
Yeah, I think Unsolved Mysteries is really hitting its stride in season 4.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
4 out of 5 Robert Stacks.
Absolutely.
All right, that wraps up season 4, episode 3.
Da, 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 da.
And we can give you our recommendations now. Liz, what do you got?
I say go to Las Vegas and buy a sex bell.
And eat all the dessert.
Oh, I ate so much dessert. I had dessert for breakfast.
I don't know if you follow Liz on Instagram, but her Insta stories the last week were making me real hungry.
It was just desserts I was eating.
Yeah, chocolate, delicious dessert for breakfast. Oh.
It was so good. I can't stop thinking about it.
Yum.
Okay, no, my real recommendation, slightly related, is I decided to recommend my favorite sunblock.
Yes.
Which I am actually a very big fan of this sunblock, and I wore it all the time I was in Las Vegas. I am a little more freckly, but, I did burn. And I am a pale bitch, so that counts for something. This is a Korean brand. It's called, I would say it Misha. Missha.
I've heard this sunscreen recommended on YouTube before, and I think that's how people typically pronounce it.
And you can get it from Amazon, or I haven't seen it in Target stores, but I order it from Target online. So it's really good if you have sensitive skin, which I do. This is the rare sunblock that does not make me break out or turn my face red. And what's really great about it is that there's no fucking white cast. I'm gonna demo it right now.
I'm watching. Liz just put a little on the back of her hand.
Oh man, look at that.
That is amazing. And how does it feel? Does it feel greasy?
No, it absorbs really quickly.
Because especially if you're gonna wear sunblock underneath your makeup, that can be difficult to find.
This is great for wearing under your makeup, and if you don't want any sort of white, zinky shadow to your skin, particularly if you're not pale, you might be more concerned about that. The first time I bought this, a couple years ago, I put it on in the mirror and gasped so loudly that Mac came downstairs to see what happened. Because I could not believe how quickly it absorbed and how nice it looks.
It looks really nice. I'm watching Liz put it on her hand. Price-wise, is it pretty reasonable?
It's $10.
That's not bad.
And I do use it on my face. And sunblock is just expensive. It's more expensive than you would think it would be.
Especially for the nice shit that you can wear underneath your makeup. You're going to have to spend some money on it. I should maybe try some and get some. Because
try some right now.
I'll try it right now. I have been using the same sunblock on my face for years, and this year for the first time it gave me a reaction. I got some near my eye, I think. And even though I wash it off every night pretty carefully, I woke up the next morning and my eye was swollen. And I'm certain it's from the sunblock because I put it on again and I could feel it sting. So I've had to stop using that one, and I haven't found a good replacement yet for my face. I kind of put whatever I want on my body, but...
Yeah.
Oh, this does feel nice. It's very light. Really good. This is all around safe black.
Oh, yeah. Maybe I didn't say that. So this is... Read the whole name of it.
Essence Sun... this is SPF 45, and then I'm not clear what the like PA+++ means. It's like a European thing, I think.
Yeah, I don't know.
But this is quality.
Okay, so I get the safe.
It also smells pretty nice
from this brand, opposed to the Sun Milk. They also make a Sun Milk.
I hate that name.
Yeah, which is a terrible name, but it's also the consistency of milk. Oh. Like it's very runny.
This is almost moisturizing, actually. Like I like how it feels on my skin. This is when they always say you should put sunblock on the back of your hand. Yeah, I feel like I could actually wear this on the back of my hand.
I really like it. I don't really recommend the Sun Milk.
Okay.
But I bought some thinking it was the same thing, but in like a bigger container. And then it's just so runny. Ugh. But I don't know. Maybe that's better for something, but I don't like it.
Oh, I need some of this. This looks like this would be perfect. Because it also dries nice. It's not. It doesn't stay greasy.
Sticky. You can not even tell that's on there now.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? Yeah, I have kind of sensitive skin. Like certain products don't really work for me, but I find like Korean stuff usually is great.
Oh yeah, the Korean face masks. I'm all about it.
This has been a real lifesaver.
Last year, and maybe I always knew this, but I never considered it as an option. Discovered SPF. Well, it's not SPF. It's UPF clothing.
Yes,
where you can get, and all clothing blocks sun, but like not. I mean, your regular shirt doesn't necessarily block all of the sun, so you can actually get clothing that is designed. And when it's not too hot, I really like to wear long sleeves now when I'm like gardening.
Yeah.
Because it's just nicer than having to like reapply sunblock all the time or worry about sweating it off. Obviously, it doesn't necessarily work when it's really, really hot. I also got like a long sleeve bathing suit that I don't often go to the beach, but like it's kind of nice if you want to just like put that on instead of having to wear greasy sunscreen.
Yeah.
Sunscreen isn't good for you either, unfortunately. It's better than the sun, but...
I know. No, it's a real bitch that you have to put something with carcinogens in it onto your skin to prevent skin cancer.
Right.
I also have bought swim leggings, which sort of just look like yoga capri pants, but are made of...
Like the swimsuit material.
Swimsuit material, so they go to like here, and it's just kind of nice to, I don't know. Sometimes I don't want like my whole ass jiggling around, depending on what I'm doing.
I get it.
I don't know. And then you're also like more covered up, and
I had this like epiphany like last year that I was like, I could just wear pants. Like I don't have to wear like a bikini.
Right. Like, I mean, we all want Samantha to wear a bikini at all times, but it's just not practical.
It's nice of you to say. Yeah, so
I was getting packed for my trip, and I was like, man, it must be so easy to pack if you're hot. You just like throw 5 micro bikinis in a suitcase and a cover up, and you're like, I'm done. That's what I would do.
Absolutely.
If you're hot, let me know. Is that what you do? You just throw 5 micro bikinis in a suitcase and with one cover up and some wedge sandals, and you go, I'm ready. People will buy me whatever else I need.
Exactly. Yeah, that must be nice.
Okay, what's your recommendation?
Okay, I have to pull up so I'm going to recommend some books finally, because I read a lot of books during our hiatus.
All about diseases.
Actually, no. Well, I did read one book about rabies, so that was on brand for me.
Nice, relaxing summer read about rabies.
That's funny that you bring up a nice, relaxing summer read, because I was on BookTube last night I love watching people review books on BookTube, even though like most of them are YA and I never read it. I never read YA, but I just love watching them.
Sure.
And they were the theme was sort of like summer poolside reads. And I was like, I don't have anything that would like qualify. I mean, obviously any book you read by the pool is a poolside read, but I feel like a lot of people reach for in the summer like light romances or like contemporaries.
Or thrillers that you don't need like all of your attention maybe.
And like the book I just started was Neil Stephenson's new book, which I'm not sure how many pages it is, but because I got it on audio, but it's 40 hours long, because that's the kind of book
nice light read
I tend to reach for. But however, while we were on hiatus, I downloaded some novellas for my Kindle, so I just kind of wanted something a little bit lighter that I could read in like a weekend. And a friend of mine recommended the author Caitlin R. Kiernan, I believe is how you pronounce her name. But 2 novellas that she wrote. One is called Agents of Dreamland, and it's not a sequel, but it's in the same universe. It's Black Helicopters. I read both of those on my Kindle, each one in like a weekend on our hiatus, and they are really, really good. Goodreads has them listed as horror, but I didn't necessarily find them to be scary. It was I got more of a science fiction vibe kind of from them. There's like an element of alien and like plague and end of the world. The characters are extremely interesting. They switch between different characters that are all fascinating. It's a really compelling story that I kind of wish was like a full-length book, but it was also pretty satisfying just to read it in like a small novella. I believe Black Helicopters came out a little bit more recently. That's the second one. You don't have to, I don't think, read one. Well, you probably want to read Agents of Dreamland first, but you don't necessarily, you could read them independently. If you're looking for like a lighter, shorter read, that's like the closest I can get to recommending one. I really, really enjoyed them. I thought they were fascinating.
Cool.
I'm always looking for more like female, like horror science fiction writers, and she blew me away with these two. So I highly, highly recommend. And they're pretty cheap on Kindle. I think I paid like $3 for each one. So
nice.
Yeah, really like them. Highly recommend. Especially also, I don't know, I feel like I'm in a lot of book groups on Facebook and people are starting to talk about their Goodreads goals. You know, you like set a goal at the beginning of the year and like halfway through you're like falling behind. Novellas are just like a really good way to catch up because you're still finishing a book. It still counts, right? So you can like in one weekend get like 3 done on your list if you care about that. So yeah, that was my recommendation.
Should we go like by the lake and pretend we're by the pool?
I mean, we live in Minnesota. I don't know.
Like lie out my Vampira beach towel and
sure.
I can wear all black and we could do some lakeside reading instead of poolside reading.
Yeah. I do think we should have a beach day. I think that would be fun.
Yeah.
So Minnesota's full of beaches. So we should probably go to one at some point.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Okay, so that's our episode. You should follow us on the social media.
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Perhaps It's You. Join our Facebook group. We're a lot of fun.
And also, if you have any paranormal tales, you should send those along to perhapsitsyouPodcast@gmail.com for our listener stories episode at the end of the season.
We need some more. You can throw a little bit of money our way on Patreon, patreon.com/perhapsitsyou. You get a bonus episode every month. And if you give us a little bit more, you get some other goodies.
Yeah, like if you give us $5, you get a coloring sheet each month. And I'm working on this month right now.
Coloring sheets are awesome. I also wanted to mention that in a couple weeks, we're going to be at the Chicago True Crime Podcast Festival.
Oh, yeah.
We might organize some sort of like getting drinks at a bar at one night. So if you live in the Chicago area, keep an eye on our social media for that. We'll probably also mention it on an episode as we get closer. But that's like, I don't know, July 13th or something.
It's coming up quick.
We're
really not ready. Or are we?
I know. We're like in the middle of June. I don't know.
Let's find out what happens. Okay.
Ready or not, we will be in Chicago that weekend. So keep an eye out on our stuff. We'll let you know if you're in the area. Or if you're going to the festival, stop by and say hello.
You bring a hedgehog. We'll sign it.
Sign an actual hedgehog?
No.
That sounds like animal cruelty. I will cuddle your hedgehog.
We'll make an autograph just for the hedgehog.
Yes, we will. I'll actually only sign autographs for hedgehogs. No one else.
I can't imagine anyone wanting us to sign anything except a hedgehog.
Obviously.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Yeah, we have a website. It's perhapsitsyou.com and you can listen to episodes there. Bye.
Check it out. Bye.
Solve mysteries.
Bye.